The little girl with the missing front tooth looked up at me and asked if the forest spirit was really made of moonlight. I told her he was made of moonlight and river water and the memory of every story ever told, which was the most powerful thing of all. A circle of children sat on the worn rug around me, their faces turned up, and for a moment, the whole world was just their quiet breathing and the weight of the old story in my mouth. A story my grandmother told me on nights just like this one. This was what it was for, all of it. This moment of shared wonder was the reason Mythos Comics existed. It was our 5th anniversary and the store was full of people and laughter. From my spot on the floor, I could see the whole kingdom. The wooden shelves reached toward the ceiling, packed tight with 1,000 different worlds. Posters from local artists covered the walls between them, a gallery of heroes and monsters. On the old couch by the window, a group of teenagers argued about a tabletop game, their voices a comfortable part of the store's sound. Every person here was a part of the place, their presence making it more than just 4 walls and a pile of inventory. They were the community we had built from nothing. I finished the story and the kids clapped their small hands. I looked over their heads and found Tane behind the counter. He wore a neat button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking more like a manager than the dreamer who had sketched out our logo on a napkin in a college classroom. He was smiling at a customer, but the smile did not reach his eyes. There were dark lines under them, a kind of exhaustion that sleep could not fix. I felt a familiar warmth spread through my chest, a feeling so constant I barely noticed it anymore, the simple fact of Tane's presence in my life. Our friendship was the foundation stone of this whole place. The party was a charity drive for the local library, so most people were donating books instead of buying them. Tane had agreed it was a good idea, a way to give back. He stood at the register, taking a $5 bill from a woman buying a single comic for her son. He placed the money in the till, and his hand lingered there for a second. I saw his shoulders tighten just a little before he turned to the next person with that same polite, distant smile. He was tired, I thought. We were both tired. It had been a long, good day. Slowly the family started to leave, calling their goodbyes. The teenagers on the couch packed up their game pieces and promised to come back next week. The noise faded until it was just me and Tane left in the quiet shop. The air smelled of old paper and the rain outside. "That was good," I said, getting up from the floor. "That was a really good day." "Yeah," Tane said. He was straightening a stack of graphic novels, his movements precise and automatic. "Good turnout." I walked over to the counter, feeling the energy of the party still buzzing inside me. I wanted to hold on to it, to talk about the future and the next 5 years. We should do more events like this. Tane did not look at me. He just nodded, his focus entirely on the books in his hands. He pushed the stack into its proper place on the shelf. "I have to go count the till," he said. He walked past me toward the back office, his steps heavy on the old floorboards. I watched him go, the warmth in my chest turning into something else. A small, cold knot of confusion. The door to the office clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the kingdom. The big front windows were dark with the night outside, reflecting the empty aisles and the colorful spines of the comic books. I started to clean up, picking up discarded cups and putting stray books back on their shelves. The place felt huge and quiet without the people. I found the till box still on the counter where Tane had left it. I opened it. Inside was a handful of bills and some loose change. Less than $100 for a day when our store had been the vibrant heart of the neighborhood. I shut the lid. The day was not about making money. It was about community. It was about the stories. I walked to the back office, ready to tell Tane it did not matter, that what we built was worth more than a day's profit. The door was slightly ajar and I pushed it open without knocking. The room was small and dark. The only light came from a single lamp on the desk, casting long shadows on the walls. Tane was sitting in the chair, his back to me. He was not counting money. He was just sitting there, staring at the desk. It was covered in stacks of paper, a chaos of white and yellow invoices. Even from the doorway, I could see the red ink stamped across the top of the nearest one. Past due. He did not move, did not seem to know I was there. He just stared at the paper, his head in his hands, perfectly still in the silent room. The number on the screen turned green, and I was worth twice as much as I was a minute ago. I closed the trading window without any feeling and stood up from the desk. 7 years of my life had been spent in rooms like this one, small and white, with a single bed and a computer. I walked to the window and looked down at a city I did not know, its lights spreading out below the cheap apartment building. My real education started after I left home, after I lost the store. It began when a man with a good smile convinced me to invest my first few $1,000s in a sure thing. He took my money and disappeared, and the humiliation was a perfect echo of a boardroom I could not forget. The pain was familiar, so I learned its shape. I stopped being Quim. I became Wacom again, the name on my birth certificate. I got a job working the night shift in a logistics warehouse, tracking shipments on a screen from midnight until the sun came up. The solitude was a tool. During the day, I slept, and in the evenings before work, I studied. I found communities online, people who saw the world as a system of numbers and legal codes. They were forensic accountants and activist investors, and they taught me how to read a balance sheet like a map and how to follow money through the dark. I stopped buying comics. I tried to read one once, an old favorite from a box I kept under the bed. The pages felt like simple paper and the colors were just ink. The story was gone. I put it back in the box and did not open it again. Every dollar I did not spend on rent or plain food went into small, careful investments. I built my capital slowly, without risk, until I had enough for one big move. That move was tonight. I went back to the desk and opened a new window on the screen. It was a map of my old city. I typed Odyssey Partners into the search bar. A pin appeared on the screen, marking a tall glass building downtown. I zoomed in until the building filled the monitor. It took me 6 months to build the identity of Jay Santos. He was a quiet financial analyst with a talent for finding patterns no one else saw. I applied for a job at the third-party firm that audited Odyssey's books. I was a junior analyst, another gray sweater in a building full of them. For weeks, I did my simple work and watched the senior analyst on the Odyssey account. He was lazy and he was arrogant. It was easy to find his mistake, a massive miscalculation in a depreciation schedule that exposed the firm to serious liability. I wrote a quiet memo, not to my direct supervisor, but to a senior partner, explaining the error and outlining a solution that protected the firm. I was promoted 2 weeks later and they gave me the Odyssey account. My infiltration was complete. The company gala was held in a museum ballroom with high ceilings and marble floors. I stood near a pillar with a glass of water, watching. Sonia was easy to spot. She wore a dark, expensive dress and moved through the crowd with absolute confidence, a partner in the firm that was reshaping the city. Tane was beside her. He wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was styled and he looked like the man on the cover of a magazine. He smiled when he was supposed to smile and laughed at the right moments, but his eyes were tired. I watched him for an hour. He was a beautiful object in Sonia's collection. As they moved toward the bar, Tane turned. His eyes passed over my face. There was nothing in them, no flicker of confusion, no hint of a memory. I was a stranger in a cheap suit, part of the background. I felt a cold sense of satisfaction. The ghost was real. In our first quarterly review, I sat across a long table from Sonia. Tane was there too, sitting beside her, looking at a tablet. My report was on her flagship project, a new block of luxury condos. Your projected revenue for Phase 2 seems optimistic, Ms. Dat. I pointed to a line on the projector screen. The absorption rate for comparable properties in the district has declined by 6% this quarter. My data suggests a pricing correction is imminent. Sonia looked at me, her expression one of mild annoyance. Your data is conservative, Mr. Santos. We have a brand. A brand doesn't protect against market saturation. She gave a small, dismissive smile. Tane looked up from his tablet, a flicker of something in his expression before he looked down again. A month later, Tane's gallery hosted a charity auction. It was his project, an attempt to bring some life into the cold space he managed. I attended, standing in the back. The event was a failure. The room was half empty, and the bidding was slow. I saw Sonia speaking to him afterward, her hand on his arm, her words quiet but her expression clear. It was the gentle chiding one gives to a child who tried and failed. I waited until she was gone and walked over to him. He was staring at a large, meaningless canvas of red and black paint. "It is a difficult space to fill," I said. He looked at me, the analyst from the audit firm. "It's a morgue." Sometimes the story is more important than the object. People buy the story. He was quiet for a long time. "What story is this?" "I don't know," I said. "You're the curator." I watched his face as the words landed, then I turned and walked out of the gallery. That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights far below. I was not looking at the stock market. I was deep inside Odyssey's archived servers, moving through firewalls with tools I should not have. I was hunting. I ran a search for every transaction connected to the city block where Mythos Comics used to be. The system returned thousands of files. I filtered them by date, then by the legal entities involved. For hours, I sifted through the digital paperwork of the acquisition, the legal notices, the zoning applications, the demolition permits. Then I found it. It was a small file, an internal memo buried in a subfolder from 7 years ago. The subject line was a simple project code, but when I opened the document, I saw the name. It was the final acquisition summary, the document that closed the books on the deal, and at the bottom, an appendix listing all dissolved business entities. The second name on the list was Mythos Comics. I stared at the words on the screen. The past was not gone, it was just archived. The phone felt cold in my hand. I dialed the number for the journalist from a disposable phone, one of a dozen I kept in a box. When a man answered, I did not give my name. I told him to look at the debt structure for Odyssey's flagship development, the big one Sonia was building downtown. I gave him the specific accounting codes for the leveraged assets and the names of the shell corporations they were using to hide the risk. Then I broke the phone in half and dropped the pieces into a public trash can on my way to the train. The next step was an email. I sent it from a secure terminal in a public library across town. The message was encrypted and addressed to the CEO of Odyssey's largest construction rival. It contained the complete project timeline for Sonia's development, along with the primary contractor's personnel files and their thin profit margins. It was a simple invitation for a corporate raid, a gift of vulnerability. I closed the laptop and walked away, leaving no trace I was ever there. The pieces were moving, separate and quiet, all converging on a single point in time. The final meeting was scheduled for the next morning. It was the last step before the investors would release the final round of funding. I walked into the boardroom on the 50th floor and the air was still. The chief investors were arranged around a long, polished table, a collection of older men and women in dark business suits. Sonia was at the head of the table. She looked powerful and calm. She gave me a small nod as I set up my laptop. I was just the analyst from the audit firm, a necessary procedure before they signed the papers. I put my presentation on the large screens that covered the wall. It was a series of charts and balance sheets, dense with numbers. I let them look at the data for a full minute, the silence in the room growing heavier. Sonia's expression was patient, almost bored. She expected a clean report. She expected me to do my job. "The story these numbers tell," I began, my voice even, "is one of foundational instability." I moved to the first slide. It showed the toxic debt structure I had given the journalist. I explained how it was hidden, how the risk was distributed across entities designed to fail. I saw a flicker of concern in the eyes of one of the older men. Sonia's face remained a mask of professional calm, but her posture was rigid. I moved to the next part of the presentation. It was a risk assessment of their primary contractor. I showed them the data I had sent to Odyssey's rival, the thin margins, the over-leveraged equipment loans. I explained that the contractor was a weak point, vulnerable to being poached by a competitor. Such a move would halt construction for months and trigger catastrophic penalty clauses in their agreements. "This is speculation, Mr. Santos," Sonia said, her voice sharp. "It is a risk analysis," I answered without looking at her. "It is my job to identify all potential outcomes." For the final part, I presented a new financial model. It took all the hidden data, all the vulnerabilities, and projected them forward. The result was not a story of profit. It was a slow, cascading collapse that ended in total loss. The numbers were undeniable because they were her numbers, pulled from the dark parts of the server where she thought no one was looking. I finished, and the room was completely quiet. The investors looked at the screens, then at Sonia, then at each other. They did not need to speak. Their decision was made. One of them closed his leather folder with a soft click. The sound was like a door shutting. The project imploded before the end of the day. The investors formally pulled their funding. The news story broke an hour later, and the rival firm announced they had acquired Sonia's primary contractor that afternoon. I watched it all from my small apartment, the news tickers on the screen telling the story of Odyssey's shattered reputation. The company's stock value was in freefall. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the monitor. The city lights below seemed far away. A small sound came from my computer. A single notification had appeared on the screen. It was an automated alert from the human resources system at the audit firm. It read, "Your personnel file was accessed by senior partner Sonia Dat.